everybody. It's a great day. This is Gavin Mehl. We are going to recap on day 9, round 8 of the Copa versus Craig Wright Satoshi trial and go through the 3 witnesses that came in support of Craig Wright today. So stay tuned to the end. We'll talk about who's actually winning the case, kind of evaluate it, and then go through each one of these witnesses and talk about what's to come on some exciting announcements. So, all right, so check this out. So first of all, we started out with Dr. Pang. It was Dr. Pang, Mr. Jenkins, and then Mr. Yusef. Now, first of all, thank you to Dr. Pang for watching my channel, and I want to say hello to him. Greetings, my good doctor. He was very kind to give me a shout out on the record in the courtroom today, saying he's been watching my recap of the video. So I gotta say thank you. His testimony was basically to support his knowledge of workings with Craig Wright from about 15 years ago when he worked with him at BDO, and then after that, he is a scientist, and he gave very reliable, I would say very open and compelling, honest testimony. Some funny stories that came up. He was open about, some of the vagueness about his memories. However, he was also very clear about being told about the word blockchain from Dr. Wright. From the early days. He didn't know what it was, that it was obscure. And Dr. Wright had described, it was in passing in a joke, basically with where he had Legos. He was describing a Batman and Joker Lego operation, which he had, or Lego toy that he had, that they were joking about. And then Dr. Wright in passing said, well, you can use this as build a Lego blockchain. And he referenced it, he testified that he referenced it to something like it was actually similar to a Chinese recursor chain. And then Dr. Wright walked out of the room. He also mentioned kind of like a Chinese chain puzzle is actually what he referenced. And then he also mentioned about how at a lunchroom, Dr. Wright had asked him and another colleague, Ron Mann, about if they ever heard of Satoshi Nakamoto. Actually, the word he used was if he ever heard of a Japanese name, and then he was asked, was it Satoshi Nakamoto by counsel? He said, yeah, Satoshi Nakamoto. And then he said, have you ever talked to about anybody? He said, yeah, I talked to Ron Mann about it. So we did have a supporting witness that he had mentioned the idea. And this is back in like 2009. Copa was trying to get him to say that his memory was hazy. It was a long time ago. And he admitted that it was, he was being very open and honest, that it was a little bit hazy. But those facts seem to be concrete and clear. He couldn't find his actual notebook. Couldn't find the notebook regarding the subject matter on it. However, there wasn't any clear motive. You was like, okay, what's his motive to lie and make all this up? There's no real clear motive. He's not financially interested in this case or in a company anymore with Dr. Wright, anything like that. So this stuff was happening a long time ago. So, there's not any obvious motive to support some fabrication about any of these stories. So it seems to be very supportive and a big win for Dr. Wright. Wouldn't say a big win, but it's definitely momentum. And if it could be supported with any sort of corroboration with Mr. Mann, with that he talked to Mr. Mann about this Japanese name, Satoshi Nakamoto, back at that time, if it could be supported by some sort of collaboration from Mr. Mann, that could be a huge win. All right, the second witness is Jenkins, Mr. Jenkins. He was an early collaborator with Craig Wright back in the early days, like 1999 and so on, and before the tech.com tech bubble. He had actually bought, he said, e-gold. It was like an e-coin at that time from a tech magazine. So he's very, very much into the tech industry. I'm going to cut right into the bombshell of this part, and hopefully we can support kind of pros and cons on this. So what happened was during cross, so Copa rested on Jenkins after cross, and they rested on the question of did you ever get sent the white paper from Craig Wright? And he said no. I said, okay, thank you very much. They rested. Mueller Gravenu comes up, and he goes into asking him some questions about, okay, so when about the credibility of his memory, and he supported that he's got a memory just like anybody else. He was really frank about it and honest. But he did ask him about, do you recall? Gravenu mentioned that about his Norwegian proceedings. It asked him whether or not he received the white paper, but perhaps you actually saw, were shown one. And then he says, yeah, I do actually. Jenkins says, I do actually remember at a subsequent meeting being shown something called, quote, time coin. And this is around 2009, 2010. And Gravenu asked him where he was. And then basically he says, dude, does it look like one of these documents? And he recollected it. Gavin, who held it up for him, he did make a very technical distinction on it, which was, he stated the words were that he remembers the words time and drawing were a time server as a critical part of the solution. Basically, it was like a incremental and time stamps of hashing. So he had to have some specific detail on it. So immediately thereafter, Copa came back on redirect, and they're like, wait a second here. You just brought up this Timecoin thing, and Jenkins first mentioned Timecoin there on the stand. He didn't mention it in the Granith case, which he also testified to last year. And it raised, perhaps questions as to why he didn't bring it up before. But he did explain that he just wrote it down. Now, this is where things are really going to be argued out. This is going to be freaking litigated hard here. So this is a super, super important, potentially game-changing moment in the entire case. And so it is really going to hinge on words here. And let me just break it down. So, if you look back if I'm like looking back at the testimony, like it appeared that Jenkins, in the words themselves, okay, that it appeared that he could have flip-flopped on his testimony. Explaining the cross was basically that Jenkins had explained for writing Timecoin down prior to his testimony, but then first he said it was in preparation, and then he said it came up during conversation. Now, those could be, so Copa's going to argue that this is totally, he's not credible because of this. They're going to basically hammer on this point right here, and they're going to say most likely that Jenkins, he should have had a genuine, him writing the notes wasn't credible, whether he did it before or after. He was going back and forth on flip-flopping on this in testimony. Now, this is going to be a main point. Now, Lord Gavin on Craig's side, they were going to think, well, they use the word, they're going to read the transcript. They use the word conversation, then they use the word evidence. So, basically it was the way it was explained. If I remember correctly, did you hear about this during evidence? Oh yeah. Copa asked him, you wrote Timecoin down before evidence? And he said, yes. And then he said, you first remember Timecoin in the course of my questions? Then he said, yes. He said, and so this is where things got confusing. He mentioned that the items were written before the conversation. The items here were written before the conversation. And he said, but I never received anything about Bitcoin and just Timecoin. That phrase was something amid this conversation, eBay and PayPal notes. He also wrote eBay and PayPal down in his notes because there was some ambiguity in his witness statement. This is where it really seems strong. Now, the point here is that his explanation, okay, first of all, it seems kind of inconsistent and potentially cast doubts here. However, it's a long time ago and he's on the stand and they're saying before evidence or during conversation. Well, what is evidence? He's just a novice. He's not a counsel. He's not an attorney or a barrister. So these are like sometimes a legal word. He's saying conversation. Why is he changing the word conversation and then before using the word evidence? This is probably what Craig Wright's team is going to argue. Also, what's the motive for him to say, oh, I wrote this down before the hearing, before here? No, I wrote it down during. Okay, what's the motive? Oh, I lied about that. Why? What's his reasoning to lie and say, oh, I actually already had that written down before the session, or I wrote it down during. Or how does he benefit from that? So, I'm thinking about it that way. Where's the actual motive? Everything about him as a witness, if you're very credible, his background as an executive, and it's a slight little nuance there that this is like a little needle in the haystack that attorney's gonna love to litigate. They're gonna freaking pile like 100 pages on this one. Okay, I'm on this point arguing this, and they're gonna say everything about why the whole case should be thrown. Why Craig should lose on this little nuance argument. When Craig Wright's team's gonna probably say, well, wait a second here. You asked him, you heard about it during conversation, and then you asked him if you heard about it during evidence. So you asked two different things. He's not like conversation and evidence. What part? He wrote it down during conversation could mean, well, he had a conversation with opposing counsel before the hearing today. Oh, okay. He wrote it down then when he was thinking out notes. You asked him before during evidence. So it's a real technical nuance. And I would still state that this is still a very credible, highly credible witness. Copa's going to say otherwise. They're going to say this guy they're going to raise, this is a big linchpin, because if he is credible and that piece of evidence gets in, meaning that Timecoin was actually established, Craig talked to him about Timecoin back in 2009, let's say, that is a very, very important, that's going to be a very substantial turn of events for Craig. However, don't think for a minute that Copa's not going to let that one fly. They are going to flood the court with papers on this one. I will tell you that right now. They're going to argue the heck out of it. The last witness was Mr. Yusef. And, I'm going to just be short on Mr. Yusef because it didn't really seem like there was a lot of back and forth from Copa's barrister. And he spent, okay, first of all, the court admonished Copa's barrister for his cross on Mr. Yusef. In fact, the exact wording that he used, Copa was trying to discredit Mr. Yusef's testimony as a witness in general, but Justice Miller admonished the barrister Moss about his berating of the witness. And he says specifically that we're getting to the point where you have done this to death, Mr. Moss. At the end, Lord Gavin gets up and he says, I feel like there's just really no point to all that questioning. It wasn't like Mr. Yusef wasn't a game-changing witness. His testimony, he was a director at a company in 2011, 12, 13 with Craig Wright. The goal was to discredit Wright's and bring in this ATO stuff where Wright had done some tax work and try to discredit Wright's case about it and bring Mr. Yusef in and really narrow down on these fine little points. I'm not considering this as a very, it's not detrimental, but I don't really consider it too helpful other than the fact of his genuineness as a witness. I thought that was one thing about Mr. Yusef, which was very credible, was he's incredibly genuine and honest. He did not appear in any way shaking or lying. He was asked a lot of tough questions and he just didn't recall a lot of stuff. And it wasn't like, I don't recall, I don't know. He was just straight up. I felt like that was in his benefit, and I don't otherwise see him being very detrimental or hugely beneficial to either side. So overall, let's just do a recap and summary here. Today is definitely going to go to Dr. Wright because of this Jenkins testimony. And also Pan. Pan's bringing in good testimony because he's got a potential collaborative witness with Mr. Ron Mann that he also heard this Japanese name, Satoshi Nakamoto, around 2009 from Craig Wright in the lunchroom. They talked about him with that. And then the use of the word blockchain, that's potentially from his hazy memory. But, definitely going to go to Dr. Wright. They're going to argue this, the Jenkins point about time chain is going to be a linchpin in this case. That's going to be a turning point. So Copa is going to now turn all their focus on attacking that right now. It'll be interesting to see what they do to try to attack that because that's their focus. They know that if that gets, if the court considers that witness credible from Jenkins and the Timecoin stuff, this is a big, huge win for Wright. It could be a game changer in his building his identity, the identity aspect. So they're going to attack that hard. So today definitely goes to Wright. Momentum back to Wright. Now that's kind of expected because these are Wright's witnesses. So tomorrow we got 3 witnesses on the stand. It looks like Miss Morgan, Mark Archibald, Sheridan Jones. And so stay tuned for that. It's a fun little recap. Thank you again to our friend Dr. Pan for watching my channel. I'm a little guy out in California doing a little recap on some videos that gets shot out in the courtroom. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Great witnesses, and ultimately we're coming into a pretty even match here, but I would definitely say momentum back over to Wright. I got some awesome interviews coming up. Stay tuned on this channel for that. Okay, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the like button, share this video, get the word out there. There's a nice, clean, concise summary of the day of the Satoshi identity trial that once and for all determined the identity of Satoshi Nakamoto. And also shout out to my own mom, who's also I found has been watching my videos. So I love you, Mom. Thank you. I'll see everyone at the top.